Hey folks, it's Veterans Day here in the United States and Remembrance Day in the Commonwealth nations, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, etc. And I thought it'd be a good opportunity to launch the first and what I hope will be a new series of videos I'm going to be producing on one of my favorite types of aircraft in the real world, and that's warbirds. So warbirds, of course, aircraft that served in the military primarily in World War II. Uh, Wide range of aircraft from the Mustang, the P-40 Warhawk, uh, carrier aircraft, of course, like the Ford Corsair, Hellcat, and of course the Spitfire, which we're going to be taking a look at today. I've had a fascination with warbirds since I was a little child, actually, when I attended my first air show. Just absolutely loved the sound of large radial engines, and as well the sound of the Merlin engines that were in the Spitfire and the Mustang, and had a fascination with these warbirds ever since I was a kid. When I was old enough to actually start studying history and understand the sacrifices that were made by pilots in World War II flying these aircraft and the challenges of flying them, my fascination with warbirds grew even more. As a real-world pilot, I've never actually had an opportunity to fly a warbird. I think the closest I've ever come to one is a Stearman, but I've had an endless fascination with these. So again, as I said, I'm hoping this will be the first in a series of videos I produce on flying warbirds in P3D. And today we're going to be taking a look at our first warbird in this series. The Spitfire, of course, has legendary status almost all over the world and needs almost no introduction. It served, of course, in the RAF and made its greatest impact during the Battle of Britain, repelling the German attack by air and the Blitz. But it also surprisingly had a history in the United States Army Air Force and in service with the American pilots, which I'll talk about in just a minute. There was actually a really fascinating documentary that came out about the Spitfire just last year in 2018. And the documentary was just called Spitfire. And the trailer for that documentary is absolutely fantastic. I'm going to show you a couple of very quick snippets from that trailer right now, and I think it's worth a look.
We're talking about total war. There's nobody else helping us. All the continent have fallen down, and it was us against this monster. The Spitfire was built as an interceptor fighter.
These airplanes represent to the British people an unwillingness to be bullied.
The country couldn't possibly have too many of these fighters.
It was a design which was brilliant. You can't fly a Spitfire and forget about it. It stays with you forever.
I looked up, and the air was filled with Germans. Had they landed, they'd have won, and the course of world history would have been changed.
We've got to always remember those who didn't come back.
This aeroplane stands for so much. Grace and gallantry. It's a symbol of freedom.
Wow. So I'm going to post the link for that full trailer in the YouTube description below. Strongly recommend checking it out. The documentary, I think, is available on iTunes and elsewhere, of course. If you are a fan of this aircraft and want to take a look at it, I think it's just an absolutely spectacular documentary, and it does cover some history of the Spitfire that I, even as a warbird enthusiast and as an enormous fan of this aircraft, that even I didn't know before. So I think it's worth checking out. Okay, so let's take a look at this particular aircraft that we're going to be flying today. So this is a Mark II-A Spitfire, the second generation of Spitfires, and this particular livery or this particular Spitfire model, P7308, was actually flown by an American pilot who was assigned to Eagle Squadron in 1941. Eagle Squadron was a squadron of expat American pilots who flew missions in Spitfires for the Royal Air Force and fought against the Germans prior to the entry of the U.S. in World War II. And this particular aircraft, P7308, was flown by a officer named William Dunn, who, believe it or not, was actually the very first American ace pilot in World War II. The very first American ace in World War II, who was credited with shooting 5 or more Messerschmitts or German aircraft, was flying a Spitfire. And I think that was just an amazing piece of history that I didn't really know a whole lot about before. And believe it or not, the Spitfire actually was one of the very few foreign-built aircraft that did see service in the U.S. Army Air Force in World War II. So after America officially entered the war, there were a couple of squadrons in the United Kingdom did fly Spitfires. In total, nearly 600 Spitfires saw service with both the U.S. Army Air Force and the U.S. Navy during World War II, primarily in the European theater. So pretty interesting history of the service of the Spitfire in the American forces in World War II. Okay, so we are located, of course, nowhere near the European theater, or nowhere near Europe. We are in a Mediterranean climate, however. We're here in Santa Barbara, California, and we're going to be doing a short hop to take advantage of this beautiful Southern California sunshine here and put the Spitfire through its paces on a short trip down south to Catalina Island off the coast of Los Angeles. So that's our plan today. Let me kind of show you what we're going to be doing on a sectional chart. Okay, so here's the plan. We're located here in Santa Barbara. Santa Barbara, of course, falls under this Class Charlie airspace, which extends from the surface to 4,000 feet right above Santa Barbara Airport. We're going to be departing Santa Barbara Airport, and then essentially we're going to be following the coastline and the Pacific Coastal Highway here along the coastline until we get to about Ventura, and then we're going to climb over this Class Delta airspace here. See, there are 3 airports there with Class Delta airspace. We're just going to climb over that Class Delta, and might be a good opportunity to kind of showcase the amazing climb characteristics of the Spitfire, which was designed as an interceptor, actually, that could climb very fast to altitude and then dive on a target. So we're going to try and demonstrate a little bit of that, play around with it. So we're going to climb over the Delta airspaces here and make a quick rapid descent on the other side of the Delta. We'll head over to Malibu here, and then we'll head out over the Pacific down to Catalina Island and land at Catalina Airport, the airport in the sky as it's known. So that's the plan for our flight today. Pretty nice VFR flight. Besides not busting airspace, though, we might just really try and have some fun with the airplane today. We're not flying on VATSIM or online or anything like that, so we can afford to really kind of put the Spitfire through its paces. We'll do some low-level flying near the coast here and just really kind of enjoy ourselves. So that's the plan. Okay, let's go ahead and hop back in the cockpit here and start this baby up and take it out. Okay, folks, welcome into the very snug, tight-fitting cockpit of the Spitfire. As they would say, you don't just fly them, you actually wear them. Not a whole lot of room to move in this cockpit. Let's go ahead and just do some quick cockpit checks here to verify that everything is set up correctly. We're just going to check that both mags are off, that both fuel cocks are off, the landing lever is down, and the flaps are up. And we're going to check for full and free movement of the controls. That's all good there. Alright, let's go ahead and start this engine up. So first we're going to turn both mags on, both fuel cocks on as well. We're going to check that we have a cartridge loaded in the breech up ahead. The Merlin 12 engine on the Spitfire uses a Kaufman engine starter system, which uses a shotgun cartridge loaded up in a breech to essentially fire up the engine and get it started. We're going to check that our mixture is in the ridge position and that our air screw control or prop lever is in the full forward position. The RAF back in the day used to use the anachronistic term air screw to refer to the propeller up front. So air screw control full forward, and we're going to check that our wheel brake is on, and I'm going to then prime the engine. I'm going to put in 5 shots of primer. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, and then we'll lock that. And I'm going to crack the throttle slightly, about 1/4 of an inch. Should have done that earlier. And let's go ahead and it's a tailwheel aircraft. Of course, you want to adopt the mindset and mentality that you're flying the airplane as soon as the engine starts. So you want to go control stick full back during the start and hold that back and then start the engine up. You heard the shotgun shell being fired there. There we go. And the engine has started up. We'll go ahead and close up the starter guard there, and we do have oil pressure and fuel pressure, so that's all good there. Let's go ahead and start taxiing out and get this engine warmed up in the process. So actually, before we do that real quick, since we're still here at the ramp here, I'm going to have a couple of ground crew hold down in the tail, and what that lets me do is kind of run the engine up without risking it tipping over. So I'm going to go up to 2,000 RPM here, and we'll do our mag check. It's going to turn on my generator while I'm at it. Okay, mag 1 check. Running a little rough. Mag 2 is running a lot better. This is the thing I love about A2A simulations, is how well they've simulated all of these little details here. So the best way to clear a rough running engine is just to run it off of that mag. It was actually mag 2 that was running rough, not mag 1, but you can see it's cleared up nicely now. So it's just a bit of a fouled spark plug, quite likely. So all you need to do with the rough running engine is just run it up at a higher power setting for a little bit, and usually that should clear the fouling. So that's taken care of. Alright, we'll go ahead and reduce throttle to almost idle here. And remember, again, the tailwheel aircraft, you're flying it as soon as the engine is started. So I'm going to have our ground personnel here let go, and I'm going to release the wheel chocks. And we'll start taxiing out here to 2.5. Okay, and we'll release the brakes here. The Spitfire, as we're taxiing out here, I'll talk about a little bit, had this very interesting setup for the brakes. Essentially, the brakes are... So I've flown a couple of different types of tailwheel aircraft with different brake arrangements in real life. I'll give you a couple examples. Most tailwheel aircraft, like most normal tricycle gear aircraft, have toe brakes. So essentially, you want to use differential braking. You can press down on the left toe brake if you want to turn left, and you can press down on the right toe brake if you want to turn right, correct? So there's another type of aircraft, the Piper Super Cub, which has a heel brake arrangement. So if I want to use differential braking in the Piper Super Cub, what I want to do is take my feet, the balls of my feet, or my heels off of the rudder pedals and press down on the heel brake. That took some getting used to. The Spitfire has a very, very different arrangement. It's got this lever up here on the control stick, just behind the controls column, and you've got to use that lever essentially to do braking. So if I want to do differential braking to the left here, I've got to put in left rudder and then press down on the or move the lever to the starboard or right side. So it's a very, very interesting, quirky setup there. Okay, let's stop here short of 2.5. Ensure that our oil temp is coming up. It is. And I'm going to set up for takeoff here. We're going to move our trim setting to 1 notch nose down. You see there. And I'm going to check that we have enough brake PSI there. We're all good there. And oil temp is coming up to 40 degrees C, so that's good. And radiator temp is over 80 degrees C, so we're all good here for takeoff. And we're going to leave our cockpit hood open there for takeoff as per the typical RAF procedure when flying a Spitfire. And we're just going to take off here on runway 25. So we're going to go ahead and line up with the runway and then just start our takeoff roll. That voice in the background, by the way, is the 4Flight app on my iPad, announcing that I'm entering runway 25 here at Santa Barbara. Again, beautiful Southern California morning, nice sunshine. All right, let's get rolling here before the engine heats up too much. And again, you're holding full backstick and applying any wind corrections as necessary, and you're punching and jabbing with the rudder pedals. And there we go, we're airborne. I'm gonna raise the landing gear and kind of fly level over the ground here for a little bit until we go about 140 knots or 140 miles per hour, and then we're just gonna start climbing. And I'm going to climb out at 4 psi boost and 2600 RPM. And climb speed should be 185 miles per hour, so we'll increase speed to 185. And we'll go ahead and close the cockpit hood here. And I'm going to move my radiator flap to the normal flight position, which is that right next to that red triangle there. And as I mentioned, we're going to be flying kind of low here over the ground for a while. So I'm going to climb up to 2,500 feet initially until we're clear of the Class Charlie airspace, going east as we track the Southern California coastline here. So we'll climb up to 2,500. We're almost there. And then we'll stay at 2,500 until we're clear of the Class Charlie airspace, and then kind of descend and enjoy some low-level flying right over the coast here. And for cruise, I'm going to use 4 psi boost, and we'll reduce our RPM down to 2,400 RPM. And we're always checking our radiator temperature here in the Spitfire. We're about 110, which is fine. We don't want it to exceed 120. Absolutely beautiful warbird. And I love how A2A has modeled all the weathering of the paint on this particular aircraft, P3D, which, as I mentioned, was flown by Bill Dunn, who was the very first American ace in World War II. And as I said, the very first American ace in World War II was flying a Spitfire when he became an ace. This, of course, is Orbex's Santa Barbara scenery. Absolutely spectacular. If you love flying out in Southern California, Orbex makes some spectacular sceneries, local sceneries for the area. I don't recommend their SoCal regional scenery so much. I think it has a lot of performance issues, but their airport local scenery packages are absolutely fantastic for Southern California. Okay, we're basically clear of the class Charlie here, so we're going to descend and kind of do enjoy some low-level flying and check out some of the maneuverability of the Spitfire here. Now, of course, in real life, there is a federal requirement that you stay at least 2,000 feet away from any personnel or property, and 1,000 feet above the same. But we're going to disregard that rule. Just because we're in the sim, we're not flying on VATSIM. The only rule that we're going to be following here, of course, is that we're going to be climbing over that class Delta that we're going to be approaching pretty soon as we come up on Oxnard and Ventura. And the real reason we're going to be doing that is because we want to be... the only real reason we're going to be doing that is because we want to be demonstrating the climb characteristics and the superb climb capability of the Spitfire MkIIa. As I mentioned, the Merlin 12 engine that's up front produces a whopping 1,175 horsepower. Very, very powerful engine. We're doing about 280 miles per hour or so right now. So we're really having fun. That's the Pacific Coastal Highway down there. Incredibly fun if you're visiting Southern California, or you happen to live here. You're lucky enough to live down here, and you got a weekend to kill. Just hop in a car, preferably a convertible, of course, and just drive down this highway. Some of the most spectacular scenery that you're ever going to see in your life driving on any road. Okay, and as we round the corner here to our left, where the highway turns to the left, we'll be coming up on Ventura. And at that point, we'll demonstrate the climb capability of the Spitfire. The Spitfire, once it took off, had the ability to climb to 20,000 feet in just under 7 minutes, which is a pretty spectacular climb capability for a piston engine aircraft. So we'll demonstrate that as we come up on Ventura. And actually, it's around this corner up ahead. So right up ahead is a grouping of 3 Class Deltas. There's Oxnard, there's Camarillo, and then there's Point Mugu. So Class Delta typically extends from the surface up to 2,000 or 3,000 feet MSL, and or 2,000 or 3,000 feet AGL. And so the Oxnard to top of the Class Delta is 2,000 feet, and that's basically right up ahead as we come up on this coastline. So what we're going to do, in just a couple of seconds, we're going to start our climb. So I'm going to go to 6,006 PS. Sorry, I'm going to go to 2850 RPM first, and I'm going to go to 6 PSI boost, and we'll start climbing out. We can climb up at 185 miles per hour. And you can see we're already over the top of the Oxnard Class Delta. We're at 2,500 feet MSL. And we're going to keep climbing to climb over the top of the Point Mugu Class Delta, which is at 3,000 MSL. Really, really fantastic, amazing climb performance for a piston engine aircraft. Again, that 1,175 horses working up front in the Merlin 12 are really quite something. We're going to keep climbing here, let's say around 7,000 feet MSL, or 7,500. And then on the other side of the 2 Class Deltas here that we're going to be flying over, which is Oxnard and Point Mugu, on the other side of these 2 Class Deltas, we're going to demonstrate a dive back down to some low-level flying in the Spitfire MkIIa. So, by the way, that reminds me. This is the Spitfire MkIIa, and in case you're wondering what the difference is between all the different marks of the Spitfire and the A versus B versus C, etc., I'll tell you. The A2A simulation Spitfire package includes 3 Spitfire models. It includes the Mark I, which was the very first Spitfire, the MkIIa, and the Mark IIb. The difference between the Mark IIa and 2b really is just a difference in the wing. So there's the A wing and the B wing. As we come up here on 7,500 feet MSL, and start leveling off. And we're going to bring power back to 4 PSI, boost, and RPMs back to 2,400 RPM. There we go. And again, one thing I should have been careful about watching is our radiator temperature, because the Spitfire can overheat pretty easily, or that Merlin 12 engine up front can overheat pretty easily. All right, where was I? Okay, yes, the difference between the A wing and the B wing. The A wing, let me bring it down to 7,500 here. The A wing was essentially designed to accommodate 303 machine guns, and the B wing was designed to accommodate 20 millimeter cannons. And that's really the only difference between the A and B wing. They're both elliptical wings, of course. Very, very distinctive wing design for the Spitfire. Very, very effective wing design as well. Made the Spitfire one of the most nimble, maneuverable interceptor fighters in the world at the time. But the only difference between the Mark IIa and the Mark IIb is the fact that the Mark IIa uses 303 machine guns and the Mark IIb uses 20 millimeter cannons. And that's really it. Everything else, all the specs, the engines, etc., everything else is almost exactly the same. Or actually, it is exactly the same. And the Mark II, of course, came with the Merlin 12 engine, which improved a little bit of the climb performance versus the Merlin that was in the Mark I. And it also came with a constant speed prop, so that was another difference from the Mark I. And A2A have done a spectacular job of kind of modeling all the little differences between the Mark I and the Mark II for you to experience flying in the sim. Really, really a joy to fly the A2A Warbirds. I think all of them. The next video in this series that I do, I think I'm going to look at the Warhawk. Although I'm kind of tempted, being a huge fan of naval aviation myself, to look at the Vought Corsair from Milvus, but I'll decide either between the P3D Warhawk or the Vought Corsair. If you prefer one over the other, of course, feel free to leave that in the comment section below. Behind us, of course, is the Point Mugu Naval Air Station. And we're clear of that class Delta, so what we're going to go ahead and do now is kind of demonstrate a dive in the Spitfire, which should also help us kind of get below this marine layer that you see up front. So one thing to note, of course, about the Spitfire, the Merlin 12 engine in the Spitfire used was essentially a carbureted engine, right? Versus the fuel-injected engines that were used in the Messerschmitt Bf-109 German fighters that the Spitfires often went up against during the Battle of Britain. And the Messerschmitt, the German pilots figured something out pretty early on, which is that the fuel-injected engines on the Messerschmitts don't cut out during a negative G dive. Whereas in the Spitfire, the carbureted engines can get flooded and can also cut off the supply of fuel during a negative G dive. And that causes the engine to sputter and cut out momentarily. And so the German pilots figured out early on that if they went into a dive, a negative G dive, they could, with a Spitfire on their tail, they could potentially outrun and escape the Spitfire. So they would sometimes use that to their advantage. So I'm going to demonstrate that here real quick. We're going to descend, go into a dive very, very quickly, and demonstrate the engine sputtering, cutting out, like it would happen if you were chasing a Messerschmitt up ahead, like an imaginary one. Here we go, here in Southern California. So there you go. You heard that sputtering? That was the engine momentarily cutting out. And as I pull some positive G's there, the engine once again resumes full throttle. Or resumes, you know, its normal throttle there. I think we'll stay clear of this marine layer here by going inland a little bit. We're coming up on Point Duma, which is just over to the right side of the airplane there, or Point Doom, sorry, over to the right side of the airplane there. Can't really see it behind that marine layer. We're going to try to stay clear of the marine layer here. And we're coming up on Malibu, where a lot of very, very rich people live pretty soon. Now I'm going to demonstrate that again in the external view so you can see something else. Let's go into that dive again. So another thing you noticed was the wasn't just the engine sort of sputtering and cutting out, and the engine now resuming power, of course. The other thing you noticed was the engine sort of backfiring and the black smoke coming out. That was caused by an overrich mixture of fuel entering. There was a lot of fuel that floods the carburetor during a negative G dive, and all that fuel now gets released back up into the throttle valve and the engine, and that's what you're seeing with that black smoke there. It's an overrich mixture that the engine is essentially burning off, and that's why you see that black smoke. So kudos to A2A for modeling and simulating that. That was a real-world limitation of the Spitfire, and especially these kind of early model Mark 1s and Mark 2 Spitfires. Okay, we're over Malibu here. Can't really see it, of course, because we're over a marine layer. But what we're going to do at this point is start turning over to the south, over the Pacific Ocean, and we'll track towards Catalina Island. We want to be on a heading of, about 150, so that's what we'll do. more or less tracking almost directly towards Catalina Island right now. You know what I'm going to do is actually descend through this marine layer here, and we'll do some low-level flying right over the Pacific. So that's what we're going to do. And of course, as I mentioned, we're not really paying much attention to the FARs on this flight. Since we're not flying on VATSIM, we're not trying to sim real-world ops here in Catalina or here in Southern California. We're just trying to have some fun and kind of demonstrate what it's like to fly a Warbird back in the day in Southern California, of course. Probably not very realistic, but hey, there's a joy to flying in this part of the world too. Now, of course, these conditions I'm sure would be very, very familiar to perhaps more than a few RAF pilots back in the day. I'm sure they encountered conditions like this as they tracked over the English Channel. And we're keeping a close eye on our altimeter, of course, making sure we don't go too low. I'm suspecting we'll break out of this marine layer below 500 feet AGL, or 500 feet MSL, actually, which is essentially the same when you're flying over the ocean. Duh. You can see the ocean there, the Pacific Ocean, as we continue our descent through this marine layer. Now, this sort of scud running was very, very common for the Spitfires that flew for the RAF back in the day. Especially, you know, when they flew in support of the operations at Dunkirk. Very, very common to encounter this kind of weather. But we're more or less below this marine layer now, so very, very cool. And I'm just going to keep my descent going here until I'm almost skimming the waves. And looming up ahead of us, that's Catalina Island. That's where we're headed. Very, very cool. And we're going to track towards the western end of Catalina Island there, and just kind of follow the terrain and the spine of the island towards Catalina Airport and the airport in the sky. The winds at Catalina are 270 at 5 knots, visibility 10 statute miles, clear skies, nice balmy 70 degrees Fahrenheit, and the altimeter is 3005, so we're all good there. And there's one runway at Catalina. It's a runway that's very, very unique. It actually has a slope right in the middle of it, or a rise right in the middle of it, so the runway slopes upward on both ends and kind of reaches a peak in the middle, which creates the illusion of a much shorter runway when you, no matter which end of the runway you're landing on, as you're crossing the threshold. And also sometimes makes it hard to see aircraft that are on the opposite end of the runway, or animals, for instance, if they enter one end of the runway. But the one runway at Catalina Island, it's runway 0422, 0422. So we're going to land on 22, and looking at ForeFlight here, and the sectional on ForeFlight, runway 22 requires us to use a right pattern. So that's what we'll do. And we might make a low pass over the runway and have some fun before we actually land on it. Now, in real life, of course, we're pretty close to some NOAA designated national marine sanctuaries, and so we definitely would not want to be doing this sort of low-level flying in real life. But hey, since we're in the sim, why not have fun? Up ahead, by the way, this is Orbex's Catalina scenery, photorail scenery coverage for the full island. Very, very nicely done. And again, if you like to do VFR flying in P3D in Southern California, I don't recommend the Southern California region from Orbex so much, but their local airport scenery packages are absolutely fantastic. San Diego, Santa Barbara, and Catalina Island are all just absolutely fantastic. And I believe they also have a couple of inland airports. There's Agua Dulce, L70, there's Big Bear, which is absolutely fantastic, L35, and then they've got Palm Springs Airport as well. Just absolutely nice airports to fly in and out of, that you can do a lot of VFR flying. Just a really incredibly nimble, maneuverable aircraft here. Beautiful Southern California sunshine. Really nice morning to be flying. As we do a very dangerous attempt at a barrel roll. So as long as you keep some positive G's going, as long as you don't get into negative G territory, the engine will not sputter and cut out. And I was really, really worried that was going to happen and that this flight was going to be ruined. But hey, saved there. We're going to be a bit more careful about doing things like that in the future. And the airport elevation at Catalina is 1,600 feet, pattern elevation of 2,600 feet. But as I said, we're going to do a low pass over the airport. I can see it up ahead. It's on that plateau there. There it is. So we're going to go over to the over the ocean here to our left, and then kind of do a quick low pass over the airport and the runway. Catalina traffic, Spitfire X-ray Romeo Delta is 2 miles to the west. We'll be circling around to do a low pass north to south over the runway, Catalina. Now, of course, I should have made a call 10 miles out, but that's how I would do it. If I was flying on WATSIM, I'd make a call 10 miles out, then 3 miles out. Well, actually, let me rephrase that. 10 miles out to announce my intentions to either land or enter the pattern or what I'm planning to do. If I'm just planning to kind of fly over the field, for instance. And then 3 miles out, I'd be coming in to announce my intentions on which which runway to land on, as well as whether I'm using left traffic or right traffic to land on that runway. And then I'd be announcing 45 to left or right downwind, and then downwind, base, and final, as well as whether it's a full stop or the option or a touch and go. Okay, let's go ahead and turn around here, and we'll do a low pass over the runway. Have a little bit of fun. There's a runway over there. And it has a very interesting PAPI setup, by the way. Flashing white means you're too high. A steady light means you're on on glide path, and flashing red means you're too low. It's one of these special PAPIs. Okay, low pass over the runway here. There we go. That worked out nicely. Now the only difference there is I was actually properly coordinated. I was kind of using a little bit of rudder during that barrel roll, which helped. Okay, we're going to climb up to, well actually we're all past our pattern altitude. I was planning to climb up 2600, we'll descend to 2600, and I'm going to open my radiator flap to the fully open position now, and that's to set up for landing. And I'm going to descend to 2,600 feet, which is pattern altitude, and we'll come in on a 45 to left downwind for runway 26 to Catalina, or 45 to right downwind for runway 26 to Catalina, since it's a right pattern. Okay, that's 2,600 feet. Let's level off, and I'm going to start reducing power here to slow down. There's the airport. Catalina traffic, Spitfire X-ray Romeo Delta. 45 to the right downwind, runway 26, Catalina, full stop. Catalina traffic, Spitfire X-ray Romeo Delta. Right downwind, runway 26, Catalina. And I'm going to move my prop lever to, or air screw control to full forward, fully fine. And we'll slow ourselves down here. And below 160 miles per hour, I can lower the landing gear. That was a very, very unconventional pattern, by the way. I meant to start descending as soon as I passed a beam of the threshold, but got a little carried away looking at the checklist here. Okay, below 160 miles per hour, I'm going to lower my landing gear. See them coming down there. And we'll go ahead and turn base and final. Love that landing gear extension. And below 120 miles per hour, I can get full flaps in. And we're of course going to open our cockpit hood here for landing as per the checklist. And we're below 120 miles per hour. I'm going to go ahead and lower a flap so we can get a better view of the landing here, or the approach, or the runway on approach. And we want to sort of slowly reduce speed down to a target speed of 85 miles per hour as we cross the threshold. And once we cross the threshold, we're going to close the throttle and transition into a 3-point landing attitude and attempt to make a 3-point landing. And my goal, of course, is to make that PAP indicator not flash and hold steady like you see there. slightly low. And once we land, we're going to try and taxi in very, very quickly to avoid this radiator overheating. Okay, we're firmly on the ground here. I'm going to go ahead and apply a little bit of brakes to try and stop this taxiway right here. Okay, and we'll turn left in this taxiway and go ahead and taxi on in. Raise the flaps. And I love the Spanish-style architecture of this old terminal building at the airport in the sky. Really nice little GA airport to fly into. It's actually a private airport, believe it or not. And we'll pull up to this gate here, where I believe a beautiful senorita is waiting for us. Being careful not to tip the aircraft over on its nose. Before we shut down, let's very quickly do a replay. I want to see what that looked like from the outside. Alright, not too bad. That was kind of a tail-low wheel landing, really, more than a three-point landing. I had a bit of excess speed there that I was trying to bleed off during the flare, and that was primarily a result of me not closing the throttle soon enough after I crossed the threshold. If I had closed the throttle completely on schedule as we crossed over the threshold, that probably would have been a just perfectly fine three-point landing. Okay, all right, let's go ahead and stop the replay here and go ahead and shut down. Okay, radiator temps again. You don't want that exceeding 120. Alright, and to shut down the aircraft, first thing I'm going to do is apply the parking brake here. And again, you're always flying the airplane. What you want to do at this point is go ahead and shut off the fuel cocks, both of them, and increase power slightly while holding the control stick full aft. And as you hear the engine starting to run a little rough, that's when you pull the slow running cutoff there. There we go. Engine shutdown. Generator off. Mags off. Gonna go ahead and put in my wheel chocks here. It's kind of an unconventional place to stop at Catalina, obviously, but hey, we're flying a Spitfire. I think we can afford to break a few rules and do things in style. Alright, folks, so that was a really fun experience flying a Warbird. As I mentioned, This is the first in what I hope will be a series of videos focused on flying warbirds in P3D primarily, flying warbirds in the sim. And I'm going to be flying primarily A2A warbirds like the Spitfire here, obviously, the Mustang, the Warhawk, and also some warbird potentially from MkIIa, which is the VOD Corsair, since I'm a huge fan of naval aviation. But I'm really looking forward, hopefully, to, if there's interest, in continuing these series and expanding it into a long-running series of videos on checking out warbirds in the sim and kind of exploring the history and as well the flying characteristics and having some fun flying these aircraft in the sim. In all seriousness, keeping these aircraft flying in the real world, I think, is a very, very important endeavor in terms of respecting the sacrifices that pilots in the real world, of course, have made flying these aircraft and often giving their lives and limbs in the service of their countries in the Second World War. So if you ever had an opportunity to go to an air show, and especially one of the biggest air shows in the world, of course, Oshkosh, I strongly recommend you check out Warbird Alley, which is where you can find dozens of these old warbirds flying and as well parked, so you can kind of see them up close and personal and really get to see some living history. There are opportunities to actually be involved in restoring and maintaining and keeping these birds flying in real life. There are organizations like the Commemorative Air Force, and there's chapters all over the country. I'm going to show you some I'm going to provide some links in the YouTube description below to the Commemorative Air Force chapters all over the country, and hopefully there's one near you that you can join. There's also the Canadian Historical Association if you're up in Canada, and I'm sure there's organizations all over the world in the Allied countries that fought in World War II where you can get involved in real life, actually, in either donating time or money or just straight up volunteering in person and keeping these beautiful airplanes flying in real life. I think it's a really good cause. It helps, maintain and keep this essential sort of piece of history living, so that generations to come can hopefully get to see it and experience it and learn more about the history. All right, hey, thanks again so much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. And as always, any questions, thoughts, comments, more than welcome to leave them in the YouTube comment section below. If you like this content, make sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons. And I look forward, hopefully, if there's interest, in creating another one of these videos focused on other warbirds and keep this series going. All right, you all take care. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.